corrected and didn't. So for those of you who are in attendance, we are recording. If you would like to not be recorded, if you don't want your face recorded, please feel free to turn off your camera. If you don't want your voice recorded, then feel free to put questions or any kind of interactions in the chat, and we'll be monitoring. I promise to monitor that. Welcome here. You know, we do land acknowledgements traditionally when we gather in space, but it's I think that particularly on this conversation of how we create regenerative and healthy local communities, I think looking to the way that our Indigenous people of this land have shared this land for many centuries and have taken care of this land for many centuries sort of sets an example about community wealth and local sustainable economies and local sustainable communities. And so we're talking about the practices of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Petun First Nations, as well as the Mississaugas of the Credit. And that's sort of the basis for the Dish with One Spoon covenant and treaty. And that Dish with One Spoon agreement talked about how people share in the land and make sure that all of the groups that were using this land and were inhabiting this land sort of took what they needed but left enough for others, and made sure that the usage of the land was circular, that what you took you put back, and what you only took what you needed, so that the land could support the entire community of different nations here. And so I think that we can hold those practices and those principles as we open this conversation about community wealth here in Regent Park, and remember the history of this land that goes back well before the settlers arrived a couple hundred years ago. So we're super glad to have you. This, like I said, is the sort of initial conversation about community wealth. This project is supported by the City of Toronto, but it is a collaborative project between the Center for Social Innovation and also the Yonge Street Mission and the Social Development Plan, Employment and Economic Development Table, as well as the City and the SDFA office. We've got some folks from the and the intention behind this is to understand what community wealth might mean in Regent Park. As we know, Regent Park is a really unique community in the City of Toronto. There's so much that's happening here, and it's a test ground for so many different ways and new ways of building community and supporting community. And this is another one of the ways that we build a strong community between all of us. We will tell you more about this as we go. We'll take questions at the end. If you have questions while things are going on and you don't want to forget it, then please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll make sure to get around to it. And then we'll tell you about what happens after this conversation. I do want to spend a couple of seconds introducing people who are in the room, just so that you know who's talking to you and at you throughout the next hour and a half. I think I know most of you, but my name is Denise, and I am the newly minted Senior Programs Manager of Community Strategy Projects and Partnerships for the Center for Social Innovation. I have spent the last 3 years working in Regent Park, and I am deeply in love with this community. And so I'm super happy to be working on this project. We have Tom with us, who will be doing a lot of the talking. He is the mastermind. He's brilliant. He's the researcher who's going to be doing a lot of the work on this project, compiling data from community wealth projects in other places, but also some projects that are close to home, like Parkdale and those kinds of things. And he'll also be leading the conversations that happen next week. We have Paula Garcia from the Yonge Street Mission, and she, again, most of you know who she is, and I'm going to muck up her job title, so I'm not going to, I'm not going to do that to her, but she sits at a lot of the tables, particularly around wealth creation and supporting local business and local entrepreneurship and local employment. And so we're really happy and lucky to have her here with us. And then we have Gail and Merwan, who are residents and also the resident co-chairs of the Social Development, Employment and Economic Development Table, and have already lent so much knowledge and context to the work that's happening already. And so they will present to you about some of the stuff in this community context stuff later on in the presentation. So I think that's a pretty good quick introduction of the folks who are here, again, because this is such a tight-knit community. Most of us know who they are. Again, please put questions in the chat. And again, for the people who are just coming in, we are recording this session. If you don't want your face recorded, then please feel free to turn off your camera. And if you don't want your voice recorded, then please, by all means, put your questions in the chat. During the question and answer period, if you're able to, I really encourage you to use the raise hand function. And I promise to keep tabs on the list. And we'll try and keep it as orderly as possible so we can get to everybody's questions. From there, I'm going to let Tom take you through this, and we'll talk to you a little bit later.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for coming to this. Yeah, let me move on. All right. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about why we think this project is a good idea, sort of the reasons behind looking to develop a new sort of economic system, or why sort of local community wealth building would be a good idea. I'm sure you all know most of these major things already, but it's important to kind of keep them in mind as the background for this project and some of the problems that we're aiming to build solutions for. So obviously inequality in Toronto is a huge issue. Hang on, I'm just going to try and move this. Okay. So obviously inequality in Toronto is a huge issue. And the economy, as anyone who has walked around downtown Toronto will know, is working for some people extremely well. Some people have made a lot of money, but many are being left behind. And then gentrification is also a growing issue in many neighborhoods around the city. People are struggling. New stores keep coming in, prices are going up, people are feeling alienated from their old coffee stores. Their old coffee stores are closing and being replaced by Starbucks that charge 3 times as much for a cup of coffee. And then the pandemic has exacerbated these trends. So small local businesses that were sort of making month to month before can't and are going under and are being replaced by big chains who can afford to make a temporary loss and are betting on making more money in the place when the pandemic is over. And existing economic strategies we have sort of help small local enterprises, but not nearly as much as they help the big box stores and the big chain stores. And another thing that the pandemic has made increasingly bad over the last while, I mean, it was bad before, but it's getting worse. People are struggling to find meaningful and valuable work. We see here about how Amazon is hiring thousands of new employees when the local store where somebody could actually work and be a part of their community is going under. People are being increasingly forced to work for places like Lyft and Instacart rather than working for a community organization that actually gives back to their neighbors. So this is the kind of grander setting that we understand this project to be a solution in. And then specifically in Regent Park, as I'm sure you all know, and know to far greater detail than I do, in fact, Regent Park has an incredible history and an incredible community, but it suffers from many of the same issues that the rest of Toronto does. Gentrification is a problem, lack of local jobs is a problem, lack of local training, chain stores taking over space from local businesses, lack of financial support for small businesses. This is nothing that specific to Regent Park, but it is something in Regent Park that we think this model might be able to offer a new direction, a new path. Perhaps we can together forge a new economic model that puts the community first. So the city came to us with a proposal to try and do this research. And luckily, we have the two city members here to tell us about their vision and let us know what their understanding of community wealth building is. So I will hand it over to Hanifa and Daniel to do that for a minute.
Hey, Thomas, and hello, everyone.
Hi.
Thomas, is this a slide that you want it to be on?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Hanifa, and I work with the city's Poverty Reduction Strategy Office, and I'm joined by my colleague, Daniel, which many of you know, given his relationship and proximity to the work in Regent Park. So a little bit of background as to where our efforts and our investment in this feasibility study is coming from. So the Poverty Reduction Strategy Office has been working for some time since its inception and movement in the community since 2016 when it was approved by council on issues related to community wealth, but not specifically. And so when I say that, we're talking about areas of work related to social procurement, community benefits, community development, and so on. We've also been doing some work with the public sector institutions, so large institutions that procure a lot of goods and services in the upwards of the billions of dollars. And so some of our work has been focused on better understanding how, to Denise's earlier point around our Indigenous communities who practice circular economies, is how can we work with our community resources and leverage city resources as well as other large economic institutions to be more circular within the community. And so our efforts to invest in understanding what this type of economic model could look like from a community first perspective is what brought us to a partnership with Regent Park and the community partners that are here organizing today's conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to sort of share any insights that I may have missed out on, but also to sort of add to it from a community perspective as his work has been deeply rooted in Regent Park. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. As was mentioned, my name is Daniel, and I work with the city in a division called SDF&A, Social Development, Finance, and Administration. And many of you may know me. My work is very grounded in community. And right now, Regent Park is one of those communities alongside many others, neighboring communities in the downtown east. And part of the supports that I see myself being able to help provide this project and this research is to really help guide and ground some of those networks and those conversations, ones that are enhanced by all of the conversations and connections that you folks on the call have and are, in future conversations going to help support and bridge out and expand those circles. And so whether that be around, navigating some of the regional landscapes or the institutions, the anchor institutions, whether they be health, employment, or business or retail, helping to make sure that this effort and this information is both kind of grounded within those secondary and tertiary networks, and to help with other connections, whether it be to other neighborhood improvement areas. Further on into the slide deck and into our conversation tonight, you'll hear about some of the other neighborhoods that have inspired and really got some thinking that have happened around this particular topic. And so supporting from my end other connections to neighborhood improvement areas that I have and that our team has within the city. And so looking forward to continuing the conversation and seeing how it begins to take its shape and take its form, and looking to learn from the research that all of us together will bring into the picture. So thank you so much for a small piece of time. And when we do get to some questions and answers, happy to help provide any clarity that might be needed from our end.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Daniel and Hanifa. So I would like to tell you all a bit about what community wealth building can mean. It has a few different approaches, and this project will probably not be able to do all of them because there are a great many aspects. But the whole point of it is to get everyone together and figure out which ones are best and most applicable and have the best potential for Regent Park. So community wealth building to us means creating a fairer and more sustainable economy. Specifically, it's about creating a people before profit centered approach to local economic development. So really centering on how we can create value and meaningful work and community building that does not first think about how can we make money, but first think about how can we improve the neighborhood and the community. And it aims to do so by thinking about how we can take control back into the hands of local people and redirect wealth back into local economies rather than extracting it out into the larger economy or having bigger corporations come in and remove it. And it does so through a number of different mechanisms. One is by thinking about how we can shift ownership and begin to address the redistribution of wealth. Another is by supporting local hiring practices, by supporting local businesses or investing in local community resources. And finally, we understand community wealth as a part of a fundamental change towards a new economic practice, one that does not focus primarily on profit or on big corporations, but one that understands value as something that has a triple bottom line that includes the community and includes the environment, one that is regenerative and equitable and prosperous for everyone, not just the few people who happen to own the big businesses. So the Center for Local Economic Strategies is one of the oldest institutes thinking about community wealth building. And when I say oldest, they're only about 15 years old. This idea has not been around for very long. They have 5 major pillars of community wealth building that they understand: finance, land and property, spending and workforce, that when thought about together through this framework can build a generative economy, which is just their sort of term for a community wealth building economy. And you can see here under finance, they're thinking about increasing flows of investment within local economies by recirculating the wealth that exists in the economy rather than paying wages to a big corporation that is ultimately outside of the community, or through land and property by deepening the function ownership of local assets, by utilizing public procurement spending and creating dense local supply chains within the community, and through workforce, through fair employment practices, through democratic ownership, through triple bottom line social enterprises. And although this idea has only really been circulating for the last 15 years or so, there are a number of really impressive local communities that have started instituting this model and have had incredible success so far. So the oldest is Cleveland in the US. And this map here, you can see, well, map's more like a diagram, I suppose, is from Cleveland and sort of maps out how they understand the structure to work for them. So you can see the anchor institutions there that work closely with worker cooperatives, that circulate money with nonprofit corporations, the municipal government, and the surrounding community. It's actually a bit more complicated than that, but that is the big idea. Then Preston in the UK does something similar. And I recently read about North Ayrshire in Scotland, who have been incredibly successful in reducing poverty and growing the local force after their city was gutted in the 80s after deindustrialization. And then finally, for my money, the most impressive of all of them is Parkdale in Toronto. The Parkdale people's economy, I've spent the last 3 weeks reading everything that they have written, and I could not be more impressed by what they have put together there. Over the last 15 years, they have built an incredible platform. And their goal was to build a foundation for decent work, shared wealth, and equitable development. And if I could sign up to any one definition of community wealth building, it would be this one. Right in the beginning, they set 4 core values for how they wanted to structure this system: diversity, affordability, inclusion, and equity. And then they got to work and they started building a network of over 30 community-based organizations, all collaborating together, building new platforms, figuring out new ways of working together in order to achieve this goal. One of the most impressive things I think that they did right in the beginning was develop these well-being indicators you can see on the right here as a new kind of metric to understand what wealth means. So wealth to them doesn't just mean the amount of money you have. Each one of these well-being metrics is an aspect of community wealth to them. Each one of those is equally valuable, and you can't build one without building the other. So they have put a lot of time and effort into thinking about everything from accessibility and inclusion to social and natural infrastructure, food security, community financing, learning, economic opportunities, and so many more things. This is just an example from one of their later reports that came out 2 years ago on the community investment platform that they started setting up and all the things that they have managed to build over the last couple of years. So they have a participatory community planning process that builds what they call participatory democracy. So it allows everyone in the community to have a decision in how finances are spent, which things are bought, how affordable housing should be constructed, etc. They have a community land trust model that allows land to be held by the community and for the community to have a say in land investment. They're building a local currency program they call the Co-op Cred program. They have a movement for community benefits. And until recently, unfortunately, I just heard that this has been shut down because of the pandemic, but they had a community-based food distribution and procurement network called the Community Food Flow Project. Just talking to Victor Willis about this a few days ago, and apparently they're going to try and start it up again after the pandemic. I really hope they succeed. So this is just one example of what community wealth building could look like. Of course, Regent Park is not Parkdale, and things are quite different here. But nonetheless, some of the main things that we have taken on board from reading all of this and would like to then discuss with you over the next few weeks is figuring out what kind of new strategies for policy change in terms of community wealth building we could develop at Regent Park, what kind of new ownership models, new local hiring and training practices, local procurement strategies, and ways of making community enterprises work to make a stronger neighborhood. But I am not the expert on Regent Park. For that, I will hand it over to Gail and Morwan to tell us all the things they know.
So I can start off certainly by saying, I think of, as a resident, I think of community wealth as community control, right? So being able to transform the economic skills so that they work in our favor. And I think that this project also builds on the work that we're doing at the EED table around economic development, entrepreneurship. So I'm excited about that part of it. And I wanted to kind of touch on a couple things here. If you can go to the next slide, which is about local businesses. We know that local businesses exist in Regent Park, whether it's Sam's or it's LeBeau or it's an enterprise like Taste Leg. And there's a difference between I say between LeBeau and Pate Box, and what can we afford. So for me, community wealth is about having local entrepreneurs, so local businesses providing their services. And if you want to go to the next slide, you've got Merwan on the line here, and there. Can you go to the next slide? you know, where he's created a social enterprise. So for me, again, you know, community wealth building is, again, is about local hiring, local training, and he's got an amazing product in Finneguard Security, and you know they're providing a security service, but also a mandate to hire locally. And for me, that is a great example again of community wealth. And if you can move to the next slide, and you hear in Thomas's speak and the cities speak, they talk about procurement. And I want to break that down and say local purchasing of goods and services. We've got a catering collective. We've got, you know, the sewing collective. And I thought, you know, when the pandemic started, I said, wow, it would be amazing if we, the catering, but we, Regent Park and the catering collective are the ones creating masks for frontline workers. And for me, that is a good definition of local purchasing of goods and services. You know, when we deputed the city councilor, one of the questions she asked was, if we gave you the money directly, so let's say we gave you $10,000, would you be able to use all of that $10,000 as compared to the city? Because if the city is the one kind of managing the 10,000, there are all these things that, all these costs that may come out of that 10,000. So kind of the direct influx of that money to the city is for me a part of community wealth building. And again, if we can go to the next slide, the last one here for me is, you know, about community enterprises, lots of them, right? And to me, that idea is working to make a stronger neighborhood. We've got all of these social enterprises in the community, and you know, we've got to take this to the next stage and say, here's how we can build that community wealth. And I want to give you an anecdote. I guess I like stories, but you know, I was born in a country, you know, in the Caribbean, and I actually have a credit union account there. And I don't live there, and I haven't lived there for a long time. And I can go and borrow at any point from, actually, I don't have to go there. From here, I can borrow money from that credit union. Why? Because I am a member. They will not say no. They cannot refuse me. I am a member. I have a membership card. I pay my membership dues. I am a owner within that credit union. And so I'm able to secure funds as I need. I don't hear no from them simply because I'm a member. And for me, again, that is a good example of community wealth building. And I'm going to pass it over to Merwan.
Geez, thank you so much, Gail. I think she pretty much said everything. But I think as a resident, I think, you know, we need to take a moment to reflect. You know, I feel like Regent Park is a community that has been, you know, looked at under a negative lens for the longest time. And as we go through the revitalization process and the whole neighborhood getting gentrified, I think we need to acknowledge, you know, where we've come and where we're trying to go. So when I say this, I feel like, you know, I'm very lucky to have, you know, very knowledgeable mentors around me, and some of them are here actually, Kumsa and Walid, and they taught me way before the concept of community wealth. And I was able to, you know, soak that in and apply that. And how that looked like was when we started an initiative around food insecurity, they were very adamant about buying locally. How do we support local? And they started that by purchasing from the Regent Park Caring Collective, you know, for a whole month. This is something they got support, exterior support, and they made it happen. And you know, through the SDP, I got to learn about Chris and the paint box, and I learned exactly what Thomas was sharing earlier, how the pandemic affected a lot of businesses, and he was in a very hard time where he was trying to dissolve the business. And me being part of a grassroots and through the grant applications that a lot of these youth were a part of, we decided to do a lot of barbecues, and we decided to go purchase our burgers from Paintbox, despite the prices, and even Chris tried to give me a discount. I said no, it's not about the discount. I'm here to support you. That's what this is looking like. This is what community wealth looks like. I want to. It's not even. I'm not asking you. I want to do this. And then we also took part in a lot of projects where we did another food insecurity program for about 3 months during the weekend, and we highlighted an entrepreneur named Howla Kitchen. She was new at what she was doing. She was a caterer, and Waleed helped her walk through the process of incorporating and becoming a business. And we supported that way. We said we want to purchase from you for a whole 3 months. So imagine what that did to her. It was a shock, but it was it was a growing process. But that's what support looks like. So when you look at community wealth, I think part of the conversation is supporting, learning what exists in the neighborhood, and going out there to purchase. Denise and her ice cream parlor that she had during the summer, amazing. Everybody loved it because it's in the neighborhood. I want to purchase from the neighborhood. I also want to talk about Denzel and a restaurant he had, the Daniel Spectrum, called the Roots Burger. It was run by an agency by Dixon Hall, but because of the location and how the building was set up, there was a lot of people who were coming from outside the neighborhood, whether it was through events, or it was through visiting the neighborhood, and said, hey, whoa, there's something here, let me try this out. So I think the conversation is around how do we educate agencies, the city stakeholders, even residents, on what exists here and how do we purchase here. And something very personal to me, I think I'm just going to end off on this, which was my security journey. So the reason why, Gail, thank you so much for bringing it up, which is in Finneguard. I felt like, during my journey when I was going through security and the opportunities that I went through, I was very lucky enough to kind of get that experience when it came from, when it came to celebrity protection, when it came to doing large festivals, large events, managing all that, and just soaking that experience. I was very lucky. Marwan, a resident from Regent Park, went through that. Because the reason why I say this is because when I tried to, hire Regent Park residents, I realized that the way the industry recognizes, what an ideal security guard looks like, they don't see Regent Park. It's so sad, but they don't see Regent Park. They don't see, your hijab. They don't see, your at-risk youth who they complain about, and they say, oh yeah, we need to help this problem. Why don't you start by providing opportunities, and then we can have that conversation. So it can't. I ran into so many no's of no support as far as providing employment, that I decided, what, I'm going to start my own entity. And there's a lot of people who were not supportive of this idea. And when I went through this idea, I was very lucky to go through United Way, and they were able to refine my idea to think more of a social enterprise, because that's what it is. It is a social enterprise. And so part of what I'm working on right now, I'm still working on until today, is providing a training that's available to the residents of Regent Park at absolutely no cost, eradicating that barrier, the financial cost. And not only that, it's using the same people, the residents, and leveraging them into these opportunities. And I was able to test this model out in the Daniel Spectrum. I was very lucky once again to meet, very supportive people in the Daniel Spectrum who like the idea of hiring locally. And there was a lot of perks. And it's ridiculous when you ask me. When you talk about people who have a thorough understanding of the neighborhood, they can guide people to the closest gas station, convenience store. They know the dynamics of the neighborhood, and they can excel in what they're doing. It's not a hard job, but because of where you're from, and because of what you look like, a lot of people want to shut that door. So I think there's still a lot of work to do. As this presentation keeps going on, I feel like we definitely, all of us need to be accountable. It's an idea. It's a great idea, but I feel like a lot of us need to come together as a community, just the way we have in the past. When during adverse circumstances, when we had to go bury some of our youth, we came together to show support to families. It's happened. It's nothing new to this neighborhood. So the same way we've done that during, under a negative lens, I think we need to continue to do that in a positive way, learn about the local entrepreneurs, learn about the people who are starting a business, learn about those who are looking for work, and how do we support them? How do we prioritize them over the existing big corporations? Thank you.
That was spectacular. Thank you both. And that kind of encapsulates exactly what we're all thinking about community wealth. Like, it's one thing to have this sort of like abstract academic approach and like talk about economics and the politics of all of it. But really the most important thing is getting all the residents together and getting that energy and that positivity and build something like this. So there's really like the whole point of this project is to build on this powerful history that Regent Park has of community organization and progressive work, to use all of the resources and all of this cool energy. So to build this kind of new economic approach.
Tom, I just want to pop back to the last slide for a second, if you mind, before we continue on. Nope, the other way. Yeah, thank you so much. We have heard a lot about, from Gail and Merwan, we've heard a lot about the social enterprise landscape and the sort of grassroots landscape of the neighborhood of Regent Park. And indeed, I think that that's part of the magic of Regent Park is our residents are highly engaged and willing to do the heavy lifting to make things happen, which is really, from a community development perspective, it's really wonderful to work with a group of people like this group of people. But I also wanted to acknowledge the role that institutions play in the community wealth landscape, and that we do actually have a very strong institutional landscape in Regent Park. The Center for Social Innovation has occupied the third floor of the Daniel Spectrum for the last 8 years, and will continue to do so, just in a different way. And the Daniel Spectrum itself is a community wealth asset. That, for those of you who don't know, cooperative project of the City of Toronto, Toronto Community Housing, the Daniels Corporation, and Artscape, to build this building and have it be a space for arts and culture in the Regent Park community. And so if we're looking for examples of community assets and community wealth assets in the community, we really have to look no further than the Daniel Spectrum building. We also have organizations like Artscape who operate in the community. They are a community wealth building organization across the City of Toronto, but also here in Regent Park. The Daniels Corporation as well has done a lot of work to build community wealth in Regent Park. They had what I want to say lease to own, but rent to own sort of program when they first moved into the community, and have opened for that program. They have also utilized their construction companies in the community to create jobs for young people in the community. Dixon Hall and YSM have employment training programs and employment support programs. I think one of the first people that I hired at the Lansdowne Combe when I first opened was supported by YSM. And so creating that economic stability and that economic growth and wealth creation is something that Dixon Hall and YSM do very well. And of course, CSI is also an institutional community wealth builder. That's sort of what our roots are and what our stretch goals are, is to continue to build community wealth and strengthen communities that way. So just to sort of add a little bit more breadth in terms of what we're talking about when we're talking about community wealth, that it happens at a very super small level, but it also happens at a large institutional level. And all of these pieces fit together in order to make a community wealth landscape. So Tom, I'll let you continue.
Oh, no, that was spectacular. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we want to build on all of that. And this is the kind of overall structure for the next short while, at least. Today, we're going to be doing a Q&A to answer all your questions and talk about how you could participate. And then next week, we will be holding 2 workshops to get the ball rolling. The first workshop will be to define what community wealth can mean for Regent Park, because obviously it is different in every community that you apply it to. There are different values, there are different organizations on the ground, there are different needs, and there are different potentials. And in that workshop, we will look at the city's project outline and at some of the existing projects to understand how they have defined it, and then talk about how we can go about building our own framework. And then the very next day, we'll be doing workshop 2 to take these definitions and then figure out what areas within these definitions would be most useful to apply our time, because we do not have a huge amount of time to do this. We have until mid-June, plus minus. So we really want to focus on the most useful, most impactful places for our research and think about how we can go about designing a research program that will identify community wealth building potential in Regent Park. And then after that, out of that, we will design the next steps of the research program and figure out how we're going to write the final report and engage with the community to make sure that we stay on track. And yeah, figure it out from there. So for the what can you do? Clearly, everyone's voice is important. We want to get everyone involved as possible. So if you know anyone who could not make it today, but you think would be an incredible addition to this project, please sign them up, have them come along to the workshop next week, send them our flyers, or have them email us and we can send them the flyers. Yeah, come next week. I will be sending out reading material for everyone. And in general, just ask all the questions you have and we will do our best to give the most useful answers we can. Yeah, in that case, I think we can go over to the question and answer section.
I couldn't unmute myself fast enough. I also, for those of you who want to engage further in the community, as well as joining the conversations, some of you might know that we've been running the Everyone Every Day Our Neighborhood project in Regent Park. Phase 2 is launching now. And I've put the website in the chat for you if you would like to check it out. We would love to have more people engaged. And that's a way to really practically engage in community development and community building, which is definitely part of the community wealth strategy. All of these things are sort of knit together very nicely at different levels of community strengthening. So in the chat, I've put the form to sign up for next week's conversations. You don't have to register, but as I said in the beginning, Tom has put together a really fantastic package of information for those of you who want to be part of that conversation. That'll give you a lot of information, background, examples and those kinds of things so that we're all kind of on the same page when we start to have that conversation next week. So please do register and we'll send out emails in the next couple of days to folks. And like Tom said, by all means, connect people directly to me or to the sign up link and we can help to steward people. I will those links back in the chat a little bit later and we will start questions. It's now 6 o'clock. We've got about half an hour for questions. I'm going to start with Waleed because he has had his hand up for almost the entire presentation. And so we'll start with Waleed and then I've got Gail as well. And then Michael, you want to speak as well? If you're on the phone and you don't know how to raise your hand, just do exactly what Michael has done, unmute and let us know that you want to speak. So Michael, I'll put you after Gail. So Waleed, Gail, Michael are our first 3 speakers. Go ahead, Waleed.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you for the invitation. I got a confession. I feel nervous going after Marwan because he did such a great job articulating the personal connection that we have with our community and why community wealth means so much to us and the lack of opportunities that systemically have existed in Regent Park and the efforts made by leaders like Marwan and others. I just want to say that we have some members of the Regent Park Community Benefits Coalition on the call. I see Brian, Michael, Kumsa. So I just want to mention that we've been actually doing a lot of work over the past 2 years to push for a community benefits agreement that basically reaffirms affirmative action when it pertains to local hiring and also wealth creation. And when I think about wealth creation, I can't avoid the topic of home ownership because there's no way anyone in this city can live with a disposable income through a regular salary provided through a job. It's almost impossible. In fact, the reports are horrible. If you want to purchase a home, you need two incomes over $100,000 to make that possible. But not too long ago, in Regent Park, there was a commitment made by our governments and our developers who wanted to profit from the development of Regent Park. And what they sold to us was everyone's going to have the opportunity to have access to home ownership. We will increase the amount of units available for RGI, rent geared to income, and we're going to try to deal with the stereotype that Regent Park is closely associated with, which is high crime and other things. Those, although we had developments, we didn't have transparency. And that's what I'm hoping could be different this time around for phase 4 and 5. And we're working with residents across Regent Park to make that happen. So I have a couple of questions and I posted them on the chat. And specifically, are our friends aware of the community benefits framework that was passed by the city? And how is this part of that overall parcel of changes that the city would like to see in making sure that there's local hiring, local development, and local creation of wealth? The other thing is just with regards to who's funding this research, what is this research primarily for, and how do you plan on engaging residents who might not have access to Zoom? One of the things that I try to avoid is echo chambers. People thinking alike and being in spaces because they talk to each other in different meetings. So it's crucial to have voices of other folks, and we're actually planning on having a community benefits coalition meeting to update residents about the work that we've done and the successes we've been able to secure, like the $26.8 million commitment from Tridel for CED and other things, as well as the sort of the community benefits framework that was signed. So the reason why we do that is to hold ourselves accountable and transparent to residents who've been supportive of this work from the beginning. So I would like to get a better sense of how you plan on doing that, because that's really crucial to me. And then the last thing is what comes next after this research, right? Will it make its way to our elected representatives and bureaucrats at City Hall? And I just want to have a better sense, because we are trying to organize with other neighborhoods. We've done a learning exchange, for example, with Lawrence Heights, which was very successful. We're trying to plan one with Moss Park residents. So I just want to know, how does this inform that type of organizing and work, and where are rooms for collaboration? So I'll leave it at that.
To the community benefits, yes, very much. Community benefits frameworks are incredible. Parkdale has one that I think is a really interesting model for how this can be done. So yes, absolutely, that will be a potential topic for conversation next week at the workshops. So if you or other people on that group want to come and talk about that, and that would be amazing. I would love that.
Amazing, thank you. And I'll tell you a little bit about the resources. The City of Toronto has allocated the funding for this research project. And I don't have the budget up in front of me, but some of the money is allocated for Tom's time in terms of the research and the literature reviews that he's doing to figure out what has happened in other places and what is happening close to home. And some of the money is allocated to engaging the community, convening the community. We would like for this to be an immersive process and an emergent process that we're starting here with these conversations. This is a sort of precursor of information. The next conversations or the next meetings are conversations where we'll sort of surface shared ideas and shared understandings of community wealth. And then from there, we'll design what community engagement looks like. From the get-go, we have made sure to engage the social development plan and to ensure that we have residents around the table. Your wonderful brother and Gail are our representatives at the moment. And and as you said at the very beginning of this meeting, before anybody else got here, Gail's done a wonderful job of repping this conversation because it's really important to all of us. And the more channels that we have to engage residents, the better. I have pretty much put the word out for these conversations to every list I can find. So the more we can engage people, the better. And really, people like you, Waleed, and Merwan and Gail and other residents at this table, it's also on you to bring new folks to the table and to have people come to these things so that we can reach a wider network of people and not just the same usual suspects that we often have around these tables. Not that you're not great, but as you said, we want to make sure that we're not in an echo chamber. And I'm going to hand this off now to Hanifa, who will tell you a little bit more about what's next.
Sure, and I'll be brief. So a part of our strategy for this work is to embed it in the council report that's going to June, well, scheduled for a June report back on Regent Park, and this feasibility study will be a part of that report. And just to take a step back, one of the goals for this feasibility study is in many ways to work with community partners to take a bit of a step back to better understand what are all the components of community wealth building that exist in Regent Park. How do they align with the definitions that Regent Park residents have for community wealth building? And then how do we understand what is both there, but also what is not there, and what is connected and what is not connected? And it's from that feasibility study, and it's from our assessment of all of this information that a report will be generated that will come with recommendations that will go to council to talk about what next looks like. So I don't want to sit here and say, this is what we think next looks like. This research is there to help us inform that next step. But in terms of accountability, it is a part of a broader report that's going to council on Regent Park, and it will be embedded in that in terms of moving forward this work. And the idea is to explore both what resources and investments the city, but also our other partners, as we understand the community wealth building model in Regent Park to collaboratively move forward. And so that's sort of our planned next step, and how we see things unfolding over the next several months. And that's what we know, and that's what I know right now in terms of where we're at. But as you know, the last year has been rather interesting, and things have moved around in terms of reporting to council because of the circumstance. And the community benefits report that you referred to is a good example of that, when it was supposed to go late last year and then was moved to January of this year. So those sort of political things are sometimes out of my hands, but as it sort of stands, this report will be going to council in midsummer. So hopefully that's helpful. And if not, feel free to ask me more questions, and I'll do my best to clarify as best I can.
Very helpful, Hanifa. Thank you so much for the explanation. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Final point quickly about people like accessing everyone, especially people who don't have Zoom. One of the main goals of this project is also to develop a process to reach people under pandemic conditions that can then be replicated in other areas as well. So that's an integral part of the whole process, is to not just communicate in the established echo chambers, but to develop a model that is applicable everywhere and to everyone.
Amazing. Thanks, Tom. I've got Gail with their hand up, and then Michael. And if you want to ask a question, either pop it into the chat or throw your hand up, and we'll get to you. Go ahead, Gail.
Sorry, no question, encouragement, right? So, there are some webinars there. What did you call it again? Today, tomorrow? I loved it, whatever it was called. And I got to do one of those kind of workshops, and every week we met, and we got to meet other people from the community that we probably don't see in any of our meetings, and got to do things that we normally don't do in our day-to-day, and use the other side of our brain and think outside the box. So I would encourage those who are residents here to come to those. That's one. And two, I would ask that whether it's Denise or Thomas, I don't know if it's this meeting or another meeting, kind of that simple, what does Regent Park get at the end of this project, right? So we use some very high words, as I call them, right? You know, feasibility study, I don't know. But what do you mean? Do I get a report that I can go to the library and take a look at? Do I get a picture? What do I get? And then what does that lead me to? In those simple words, and it doesn't have to be now, but I think that's a communication you need to think about. Wally, you're next. So community benefits people, I've had, as Miss Ilma said, oh, community benefits, oh, community benefits. And I kind of knew what it was, but not enough. So I am going to challenge you to come to all the working group meetings and say, this is what community benefits is and why it's important to you, resident. I'm challenging you guys in that way.
Yeah, I accept it.
Okay, thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Gail. We will be submitting a report to the city. And as I'm typing now, I'm not making a promise, but I'm making a guess that it could be a public document that could be offered to the community. And then I would hope that we'd be engaged in the next steps of the process once it goes to council. Hanifa, if I'm wrong about any of that, you're welcome to chime in. Yeah, okay, great. I got the thumbs up. Okay, Michael, are you able to unmute and talk to us?
Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
I guess I would like to just start with the City of Toronto. There was a proposal that the City of Toronto review its job descriptions to remove unnecessary educational requirements. And twice in a row that was taken out of the final report on the poverty reduction actions. It was put forward as one of the options during the consultations, and then it was just did not appear in the final report. You know, time's a wasting. I mean, I can come back every 4 years and ask for the same thing and not get it. That doesn't accomplish anything. I want to actually get it this time. And I suppose this time means still about 4 years from now. But I want that to be in the actual action plan. That is the most important thing the City of Toronto can do. As for what the rest of us can do, I have a very limited budget, but it's not a small amount of money. It's just that I'd like to spread it out over a number of decades. So I can spend $20,000 a year on this kind of, you know, ideas-based project. But I need to have like an offer that I can't refuse. You know, a very different point of view, maybe. For instance, it was sort of offhandedly stated that people who aren't doing well are being left behind. I think that's a bit of a misconception. They're actually ahead of everybody else. The people who are not yet doing badly are behind. And when we see that that's where the current economy is headed, it's not about inequality, it's about an ineffective economy, mostly due to technology. So I need some sort of way to get people involved in these issues of reducing education, reducing technology, being more sustainable, being less resource intensive. And I need like some really practical efforts to do this kind of like project that's based on those ideas, and with somebody else to come forward with some money, as well as the money I can put into it. And even though I don't really like RFPs because they're often used for what should be just a service request where you get to define things and there's no RFP process, you're not asking for proposals, you're asking for something concrete. In this case, an RFP might be appropriate. If somebody wants to make me a proposal as to how this can be done, then I have $20,000 waiting for them if they make me a really good offer. And that's per year.
What's an offer, my friend, for this research, or for, just to be clear?
I'm talking about research that would work on opposing technology, showing that the economy is actually shrinking, that there isn't like any benefits from what's going on in the economy, that it is actually unproductive and shrinking the total economy, and getting people to change their views on this subject matter.
But thanks, Michael. Thanks for that. Maybe that's something that we can talk about offline and see sort of where that might be appropriate to add. I'd like to invite anybody else to ask questions. If you want to pop them in the chat, or if you want to put your hand up, we'd be happy to answer questions about community wealth, about this project, about how you might be able to get involved, anything that wasn't necessarily clear. We can probably also put out a sort of resource list. The Parkdale People's Economy paper is accessible. You can find it online. I can put it in the Regent Park community chat or on Regent Park Social. I'm sure Ibrahim would let us post it there if you wanted to know more information. It's about 50 pages, but it's actually for somebody who doesn't like who doesn't sit still very well. I was riveted by that particular report, and so I could. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Kumsa. Yeah, so any other questions, any other thoughts, any other stuff, just to put us on the same page for next week's conversation. And next week's conversation will be facilitated in order. Oh, Willie, I see your hand. Just hold on one second. And I've got a competing Zoom call upstairs. Next week's conversations will be much more free-flowing, not us talking at you, but actually surfacing shared ideas around community wealth in the community that will facilitate and surface some of those ideas. Waleed, did your hand go down again, or you would like to chat? Go ahead.
I just want to thank Thomas. I know he's going to be doing this research, and for mentioning the Parkdale example. Thanks, Kumsa, for sharing that resource. My question to you folks, in anticipation for our meeting next week, have you folks done an environmental scan or an audit of what community, what wealth generating practices or opportunities exist? So the reason why I'm putting it out there is I want to make sure that there's no information gap so that we're able to share as much information as possible. And I'm assuming this meeting is one of those opportunities, but I just want to see how much, how much we're aware of, apart from just the agencies, SDP, like, is there any other practices that we're aware of?
Are you talking about in Regent Park specifically now?
Yeah, in Regent Park.
So doing that scan is the first step of the research process we will be designing next week. That is an integral component.
Okay, thank you.
Denise, sorry, just to jump in, maybe another supporting document just to help prepare people's minds, and if there is some extra fireside reading that folks would like to do, the supplemental resource guide that Hanifa was shared with us prior to this meeting might be helpful, just to connect with folks with a couple more links, a couple more pieces of information. Obviously, close to home, something like Parkdale is something to reference that you might understand. Although there's others in North America and across the globe that we're also looking to for some inspiration. But obviously, most important is to customize that and make that for Regent Park, but just to help learn alongside us all what some of those learnings has been across the world to help inform us. So if others are looking to gather some more familiarity with the concepts and with the topics and with what we mean when we say wealth creation or wealth or kind of wealth sharing or economic development, these terms are all so vague and mean so many different things. I think some of that learning will help flavor the conversation in a positive way.
Absolutely. I have a dossier of all sorts of different documents from institutions that have been doing this research and communities that have been building these models that I will send out to anyone who wants and everyone who signs up. So I'm really looking forward to digging through those with everyone and talking about how they can be applied in Regent Park.
That dossier will be available to anybody who signs up for next week's conversation. So if that's something that you're interested in, please do sign up. I'll put the link back in the chat again for you. It's the only way that we know how to, I know most of you, but this is just one more, like, make sure that you want to be included and we'll include you. And, that you're up to speed on everything that's going on. Leonard, I see that you've unmuted. Did you want to speak? Did you want to ask a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yep. I've got Leonard and then I've got Ibrahim after Leonard. So go ahead, Leonard.
Okay. Just very quickly, it amazes me to see how many, this is maybe a specific example, and I apologize if it's too tight a question, but it amazes me in the building in which I live to see how many people order food in these big wasteful containers from a lot of these startup companies that are located, probably they're American based, I don't know, where they send ready-made meals or the makings of a meal that's finished off in a person's own apartment. But boy, if we could capitalize on that, that's one thing that we all do is eat. And I believe it was Merwan who mentioned that they connected with a local caterer. But it would be, that resource list that you were talking about earlier, if we could somehow promote that so people could advertise their skills, their products or services, because I know in the building in which I live, people are always looking for people who are handy women, handy men who can fix some plumbing or wire a dimmer switch or something like that. But yeah, so I would really be interested in promoting those kinds of individuals.
Absolutely. Building food security and local food supply and demand networks is one of the key parts of community wealth building in my mind. So that is definitely something that I will be pushing to talk about next week.
Oh, great, thanks.
Thanks, Leonard. Ibrahim, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I do apologize. Some of these presentations that you gave, I did not hear it. My phone was disconnected. But my question always sometimes comes back to is, when this is documented, what community wealth exists within this neighborhood, and there is this report that is going to the city, is there a way for this community to take on these initiatives on our own also to push these, what you have found further, rather than waiting for how the city might respond? How does the community itself push the agenda forward with some of the research that comes out of it from Regent Park or from the other resources you have shared? That's what I am also interested in. How can communities do this for themselves also?
So Denise, I can start, and then if you want to jump in, Daniel as well, Thomas as well. So this research activity is an effort to understand Regent Park in the context of community wealth as it's defined by residents in the community. That's what the work that Thomas is initiating next week with residents to sort of unpack what does that actually mean. But in terms of the report that goes to City Council, there is no intention for this to be a report that lists a whole bunch of to-do list items for the city to do. The idea is to generate a report to understand what community wealth means to Regent Park, but also what does that mean in the context of all of the different stakeholders and goals and objectives that Regent Park has as it relates to community wealth. And so the idea is that we all play a role in furthering a more inclusive economic system. And the goal of this process is to enlighten ourselves as to what that looks like from our different perspectives in the context of the tools and levers that we could explore when using community wealth building as a model. So to your point around, will there be, or is there an opportunity for residents, community organizations, anchor institutions, and so on to play a role? Absolutely. And hopefully through this research process and through the participation of folks like yourself, we'll be able to figure out what that actually looks like in due time. So I hope that answers your question. But again, like this is not a hope to sort of bring something forward that is only focused on the role of government. It is an attempt at building a better understanding of what an inclusive economic system looks like for Regent Park, and recognizing that there are a range of stakeholders and components that factor into doing that successfully. And the city or government is only one of those players that are able to make that an enabling environment.
Just to add into that, so it's been mentioned that this is going to City Council in a report, and just to maybe put some more context around that, it's going in a much larger report. And so this is not a standalone, a single exclusive item that will be kind of presented and debated and all of that. It's part of a larger report that's going into City Council. And so although the work will kind of inform and be available and accessible, it is also alongside other pieces that we are reporting back on our work to council. And just maybe to reemphasize something that we named earlier, Ibrahim, and thank you so much for the question. The city is not just kind of funding this research. We are kind of co-creators and supporters of learning alongside us, alongside you, alongside everyone in Regent Park to discover what that might be and what those recommendations and what those next steps could be. And so although you may see two of us, whether myself and Hanifa here kind of doing some of the talking, there is a host of people behind us in different areas of policy and different areas of research and employment who are channeling and filtering and funneling some ideas to help inform this research and inform not just research, but inform learning and inform practice for the future. And that's what we're interested to learn alongside you all.
Daniel, there's a question about the broader report and its components, and then Downtown East.
So I'll answer the Downtown East one first because I saw it first as it popped in. So it's unconnected to the Downtown East Action Plan. The Downtown East Action Plan is an initiative of another unit inside of our division, which focuses a little bit more towards more vulnerable populations experiencing homelessness or engaged in the drug trade or sex trade, whereas this project is much more neighborhood focused and therefore finds its direct connection to neighborhood units like the one that I work on and poverty reduction team like the one that Hanifa works with. And so hopefully that explains that context and that explanation. But my role here is to help bridge those Downtown East networks into the larger Regent Park community or into the Regent Park community, recognizing that, wealth creation inside of a revitalization neighborhood is something very unique. And there is obviously a wealth of anchor institutions and connections in the larger geography that need to be considered and integrated into that thinking. So that's some of the connections that I'm hoping to help support, and not just Downtown East, but across the city as we learn from Parkdale and Alex Park and Lawrence Heights and others. Let me just get to the other question. So details to our report to City Council, it's actually a report back. I don't have the exact number of the motion or of the staff report that's listed. If you were to do a quick search into the website, or happy to name this and respond back next week when we all convene again as far as what that means. But it's reporting back on certain outcomes and actions that council had asked for city staff as public servants to report back on progress made in the Regent Park revitalization. And so some of that work that many may be familiar with connects to the SDP, the Social Development Plan, the funds that are going to help support the implementation of that SDP in the community, as well as other various initiatives. And this is one of those initiatives that we're going to report back on, and saw some good fruit in just the existing conversations that have happened, and you hear bits and pieces of them, whether it be around existing wealth creation models that are active around the community, but also the community benefits framework and a whole bunch of other thinking that's happening on the ground, and saw some good fruit here and some energy that we'd been hoping to really do some critical thinking of for some time. So it was a good alignment of those things. So Kumsa, I hope that does answer the question. If there was a follow-up, I'm happy to answer that as well if I can.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. We've got about 5 minutes left.
I would like to add then just briefly regarding sort of participation structure, at least as we can foresee it for the next 2 workshops. So it's not necessary to be at both, although it's obviously extremely helpful. So if you think that one or the other would be more interesting or more valuable, then please do that. And depending on sort of how much time everyone has to commit, because we all have other things that we need to be doing, I'm sure we can organize and figure out ways of incorporating people who want to participate in timeframes and time slots, etc., that work for you. Yeah.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here tonight. This has been a really wonderful conversation thus far, just to put us all on the same page. I'm going to put that registration link back in the chat. Repetition is key here. Please do click. If you, for some reason, sign out of here and you don't have that link, I think most of you are able to connect with me. If you throw something up in any of the Regent Park channels, I'll be able to find you. We really look forward to hosting you next week at the community conversations. If you have any questions between now and then, there's a spot in the form of Jared that is a space for more questions and comments about this whole project, and Tom and I will be monitoring those responses. So if you have a question, you can put it in that form, and we'll get back to you in the next week between now and next week's conversation. Give us your email address. We'll send you the dossier of information that Tom has put together, and you'll also have our emails that way, and you'll be able to reach back out to us. If you have a good memory, I'm Denise at socialinnovation.ca, and Tom is thomas.l at socialinnovation.ca. I can put those in the chat as well. Otherwise, we really appreciate you spending the last hour and a half with us, and your interest and your passion behind this subject. We're pretty passionate about it as well. And Tom's got one last thing to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, when we send out the package and you do all the reading, or if you have any questions about like topics or concepts that you would like to have included in the workshops, things that you want to sort of flag for conversation, or things that you want to sort of hash out with me beforehand, by all means, email me about that, and we can do that. Absolutely. I'm on lockdown, so I'm not leaving the house, so I'm around. I, don't go anywhere anymore. So please email me, entertain me. Let's have a conversation.
Good company, my friend.
Amazing. Well, I've put both of our emails in the chat. Please do register for next week. I won't stop saying it. we look forward to continuing this conversation with the community. Again, as Waleed pointed out, it's really important that we have as many voices as possible at this stage in the game to start to define what's important and how we want this applied. And that's what will happen in the next couple of conversations. So please be a part of it. And thank you so much for spending the time. Also, again, please register, thanks to Gail's plug, please register for the Everyone Every Day projects. The 4 projects that we're running are pollinator gardens, community gardens, telling our neighborhood stories, and children's literacy. And so those 4 projects are really lovely and a really nice way to connect into the community and to connect into the ground level of local, regenerative, supportive, strong communities. So thanks, everybody. Have a lovely evening, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thank you, Denise. Just checking with Sugar.
Thank
I think
you.
Sugar was trying to message you, Denise. Just a heads up.
Trying to message me?
Great work,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks.
It's okay, Denise. I was just late.
Oh.
I was late coming in. So if you can maybe fill me in, I don't know, like through email or any information